Ladies and gentlemen, guys, gals, non-binary pals, friends, writers, makers, doers, dreamers, pantsers, plotters, enthusiasts, nacho eaters, burrito lovers, anybody who's ever just hung out on a couch and watched the day go by, people who can appreciate a really soft blanket, anybody who's ever looked at breakfast and been like, yeah, that was really good. Anybody who's ever had a cheesesteak, people who eat cheese, people who don't like cheese, anybody who can appreciate a really cold root beer after a really long day, anybody who can evaluate things they had as a kid that have come back to as an adult and they've appreciated it even more. And most importantly, the comrades. Hi, I'm John. How are you? How are things going? Today, I'm back again in your eyes and in your ears for another panel, and this time we're going to talk all about publishing from the beginning to the end. So hopefully, this is going to work out quite nicely. Now, I can't guarantee that this is, going to be new for everybody. And some of you have probably heard me do bits and pieces of this before, but I've now corralled a lot of this into a single spot. So sometimes you're going to get some new stuff. Now, second note, chances are you're going to have questions. I love questions. I'm a podcast people, YouTube in the future people. I'm talking to the audience that's here. You're going to have questions. I would love to answer your questions. That sounds rad. I don't care if you think the question is stupid. I don't care if you think the question is really simple. I want to answer your questions. Fair? Just ask whenever, and we'll go through. So today we're talking publishing, and just because I promised I would do this, here's me. I'm John, I'm the John from JohnHelpsYouWriteBetter.com. I've been a writing coach since 1997. I have worked on over 700 manuscripts and more than 300 authors, including bestsellers you probably know by last name, like Chuck Wendig, C.A. Maxfield, Rekha J, Stephen Blackmore, along with, you know, writers of all different persuasions, all different genres, all different levels of success and experience, and everybody in between. I could, in fact, also and would be delighted to work with you. You just have to ask for help. I did some quick math just before everything started. I have done roughly 113,892 hours of work in this job. It's pretty great. I'm quite pleased about that number because it's huge and ridiculous, and it makes me very happy. So yeah, I do a lot of talking for a living. I do a lot of talking about publishing for a living. And here I am doing more talking about publishing for a living. So, as a reminder, as with yesterday, I am not in the fucking around business. This is my passion. This is my talent. This is my thing. I don't fuck around about it. I take it seriously, and I ask that you take it seriously too. Even if you are not planning on being published and you're just trying to write your best, I want you to do your best all the time to the best of your ability. And it's not always going to be the same amount of best, but I always want you to apply it. I always want you to try it. The business I am in, if I'm not fucking around, is the making you a better writer business, because that's what I do. And I love to do it. And I believe that every single person here and everybody watching this and everybody listening to this has the potential to get better at writing, whether you want to publish or not, whether you want to publish once and be done, or write forever, or write so well that you don't have to have another job or anything like that. I believe you can do it with the right education, the right tools, and the right support. And that's what I do. That's my thing. So today, what I have for you is sort of a, no matter what you're writing, no matter who you are, no matter how many times you've started or tried or where you're at already in the journey and process, I want to walk you through one step at a time all the things you need to do to publish a book. Now, some of this, you've probably Googled or heard on social media like a billion times. And I'm not trying to come at this in any new way or reinvent the wheel. I will, however, correct a lot of bullshit, because there is a lot of bullshit on the internet. And I'm bringing real world traditional and real world writing coach and real world self publishing experience to this. But chances are you've heard some of these steps before. Sometimes, maybe not. I don't know. But my goal is to make this over the next, 50 something minutes or whatever, one step at a time, what you need to do. We're going to be in this together. And if you have questions along the way, fire away and ask. Here we go. Now, I do want to point a few things out. If you have a system, I'm putting that in air quotes, or you're already writing and you're published and you're trying to sell some books and you're very happy with how it's going and everything is great, and you just want to sit here and you're going to make more statements than have any questions. You have comments and you just really need people to know that you're successful and know that you're doing okay. I'm not here to give you a soapbox to let you feel special. If what you're doing is working for you, great. Go keep doing it. I'm not here to debate your anecdotal evidence. I'm not here to say, yeah, do it like that person, because invariably there's almost always somebody who stands up in these things or raises their hands or brings up a point and says, my experience differs from your experience. Fine. That's okay. I am not here to invalidate what you're doing if it's working for you. Keep doing it. I am talking to the people who aren't happy with what they're doing, who want to do different, or who want to get started. I want to make it better for everybody. But if you're cool and everything's going on and you're getting where you want to go, awesome. Keep doing you. We're all going to have a good time. Now, let's do one more broad disclaimer, because along the way, we're going to talk about different steps in this process. And there is almost always somebody, especially lately, who's going to bring up like software, like Grammarly or Pro Writing Aid, or any of the AI models for writing and whatever else. And I just want to make it clear that I am not a fan of any of those things. I believe all of those tools make books worse and make writing worse and lower the bar for discourse. They encourage mediocrity at best. And I will die on this hill, but I'm not going to argue about it with you over my time. This is my space and I'm doing my thing. And I'm going to tell you very simply that every time you reach for those things, thinking it's going to make your success faster or easier, you are misunderstanding the point of art. Every time you reach for those things to speed something up or do something for you, instead of taking the time and effort to learn how to improve or challenge yourself and do something better or give yourself an opportunity to be creative, you are making the collective publishing of stories and connecting with other human beings 1% worse every time you do it. Making an end run or a shortcut with AI and leaning too heavily on software are the coward's tools for art. It's just making it worse. You can do better. The reader deserves better. It takes a little time. It's a little harder. You got to be a little bit more vulnerable. You got to be a little bit more emotional. You got to like be a whole ass person rather than just, a business cookie cutter or a tech bro. But I can swear to you, the whole point of creating a story, whether it's your romance novel, your fantasy novel, your manga, your coloring book, your sales document, your whatever, the whole point is to connect to another person. And when you put a tool like AI or software in between that connection and interrupt it, you make it harder for people to get to know you and see the story the way you envisioned it. Don't take the shortcut. Instead, do the one extra step. We're going to talk a lot about the one extra step. And just so we're clear, the one extra step is knowing what to do and then doing your best at it and going above and beyond whenever possible in order to succeed. It's going to take you some time. It's going to be a little bit of work, but the whole point of making art is to connect with other people and share your life and experience with them, even if you're making stuff up. That's the whole point. And we don't want to cheat that, and we don't want to deprive ourselves of an opportunity to be something valuable and inspiring to somebody else. So we're going to talk about publishing with all those disclaimers out of the way. So everybody knows where I stand. We're in this together. We're just hanging out. We're just talking, but you got to know where I stand. So I'm assuming from this point forward, if you're here, you're going to want to publish a book, or maybe you're on the way to publishing a book. And we got to start at the beginning because I don't know where you're at. You can tell me, I'm assuming we're at day one or less than day 70, more or less at this point. We just want to get started. So, where do we get started? What is step one? Step one is the question, is it finished? Meaning the draft. Is the draft finished? Have you stopped writing? No more drafts, no more revisions, no more do-overs, no more, oh, I could go back and change this. Oh, I could make it do that. It's got to be done. And you have to be done poking it with a stick. It's finished. And yeah, every other step that we're going to talk about relies on your work being done. Now, you're going to go back and do things to it, sure, but the actual act of writing, whatever draft it is done. And you have to, one of the most critical skills, I cannot stress this enough. One of the most critical skills, no matter how many books you're writing or what you're writing, is that you got to learn how to finish what you start. Period. And your book needs to be done no matter how we choose to publish it, because everybody is going to ask you this. So your answer better be yes. Step one, finish your book. You really do need to finish what you start, period. There's no way around it. It used to be 60, 70, 80 years ago, you could rock up to publishing with a half-finished idea. Oh, I started writing a few hundred words. Give me money for it. And they would. It also helped if you were a white dude. But by and large, those days are gone. You need to have a finished draft, whatever number draft. Ideally, it's more than one, but you need to be done writing in order to move forward with publishing. The majority of writers you will encounter in the world will not do this part. They won't finish. They will find tons of reasons to keep going. Oh, I could do one more draft. Oh, I could poke it with a stick. Oh, I could come at it this way. What about this? And what about that? You need to learn when to finish, and you need to learn how to manage things. And you got to remember that writing is the act of making decisions. You choose this, you don't choose that, and you move forward. And if you don't finish, you can't publish, period, bar none. No finish, no publish. Simple. It could go on a t-shirt. In fact, it probably will one day. You got to finish your stuff. Step two, once it's finished, you need to know if it's edited, because editing matters. Editing is going to help make your story a story. It's going to round off the rough edges. It's going to help figure out and give you a sense of perspective and tools and what to work on going forward. It needs to be edited before we go anywhere else. Now, here's a thing. Oh, there's a question. Is it finished before editing or after editing? That is the philosophical question of the day. I'm going to tell you that it's your part is finished before the editing, and then a new thing happens once the editing happens. It becomes a different animal. The draft is finished before your editor is engaged, and it becomes a manuscript once the editing starts. That is always how I've perceived it. Other people may have different opinions. That's totally fine. We want to, however, address the simple issue of the difference between editing and revising, because few things are irritating to an editor as somebody saying that they're busy editing their work. You're not editing your work. You're revising your work. Editing is what somebody else does to your stuff. Revising is what you do to your stuff. That's a professional, technical, traditional publishing definition that still works. And I want to urge you beyond anything else that the better trained eyes you can put on your work, the better it's going to turn out. There's nothing wrong with going to your friends. There's nothing wrong with grabbing your critique partners. There's nothing wrong with finding 5 randos and, doing whatever with them. However, if you're trying to really put together a finished, polished thing, you're going to want to talk to somebody with training. What do I mean when I say someone else doing something to your stuff, or how that differs from critique? Okay, let's answer that question because it's excellent. What an editor does is not only give opinion. Critique, when someone critiques your work, they're giving you their opinions. I liked this part. I don't like that part. This doesn't make sense to me. that makes sense to me. That's opinion. It's not necessarily grounded in technical structure. There's not necessarily a lot of like historical education backing that up. It's just opinion, it's feeling. That's fine. That's critique. There's a value to that because you get perspective outside your own. That is different from editing, which is somebody who's going to sit there and tell you about, like, that's not how semicolons work. And this is a paragraph, and that's a character arc, and this piece needs to connect to that piece. It's much more technical. How much leeway, asks Porter, would you recommend giving your editor? Should you just take their word as gospel? No, Porter, you should not. As much as I love to have my words taken as gospel, your editor is not perfect. No editor is. No book is perfect. You can give them leeway based on how much you respect them. You can give them leeway based on whether or not their explanation of things makes sense to you and whether or not you agree with the point they're making. But even edits are suggestions because you can always not do them. I've been in loads of positions where I've made suggested edits to change this, chop this, cut this, and the author has said, no, I don't want to. And that's fine. So is editing a process of looking at the nitty gritty or looking at the whole technical structure or a bit of both? It's both. This is not covered in the slide, but there are three kinds of editing. There's copy editing, which is the stuff your English teacher would do in school. There's line editing, which is copy editing plus questioning things like your plot and your character and your world building a little, looking at your chapter structure or looking at how the story flows together. That's sort of a middle ground in editing. And then there's the kind of editing I do, which is called developmental editing, or it's sometimes called substantive editing. And that's the most technical, nitty gritty, word by word, line by line. Let's look at everything on the page, what it means, what the word is, what the comma's doing, what this story point is, what your theme is, what your plot is. It takes apart the entirety of the thing. That's a whole other animal. Is it worth revising before you pay for an editor? Me personally, yes, Ross, I do like seeing all the warts and all the bruises and all the parts you're not sure of. Is it worth revising? I think for a lot of people it is. But the danger there, the caution there is that you overdo it, you strip out too many things, and then you find that you have to put them back in. It's your editor, whomever it might be, whether it's me, whether it's 35 bajillion other people, your editor needs stuff to work with. If you try to over polish and over perfect your book, you are making your editor's job harder, and it is not necessarily going to be a better process for it. It's sort of like getting your hair cut. You could cut it yourself and then bring it, go to a haircut salon or person and have them fix it when you mess it up. But if you just go in with your hair a mess to begin with, they can trim it and they know what to work with. Or a plumber is usually the example I give at this point, because yeah, you could go on YouTube and look up how to fix your leaky sink or how to install a garbage disposal or whatever, and you could do it and maybe you'd do great. That's totally legit. Or maybe, you'd be like my dad, who once tried to fix a dishwasher and then flooded the kitchen on Thanksgiving. Like, sometimes that happens. Trained people make all the difference. It's not wrong for you to revise your work. You can revise your work. Go ahead. It's your work. You can do with it as you like. But if you're trying to get somewhere substantially, if you're trying to really learn how to be better, it can be very beneficial to go to someone with experience and training who can help teach you and explain things to you. That's why this matters, particularly to me. So is there an estimate of roughly how much revision you should do? No, I have no magic number for you. And is it best to have it completely finished before going to an editor, or should I do it chapter by chapter? Ideally, your editor, whomever they might be, wants your thing, your manuscript, 80% done. Ideally more than 80%, minimum 80% complete. The ending can be a variable thing because you don't know how much you're going to end up changing in editing. They might read your first 10 pages and go, this thing sucks, and then tell you to redo the first 10 pages. It happens all the time. What you want to do though is try to get as much of it done yourself as you can before you do this. It can be done chapter by chapter. That's an arrangement you can make with your editor, depending on how they want to handle it. It's not a uniform thing, but you want to get as much of it done as possible before you move forward. It's going to make your life a lot easier. So, step 3, we're done. The book is. What's up?
I just want to point out a little bit when Porter was asking you about how much leeway you would give to the editor. Like in my case, sometimes communication is always helpful because sometimes you may not
Yes.
necessarily understand why the editor is pointing something out. So, like for me personally with John, we've had several conversations before where he would edit something, and I really at first I'd be like, "Oh, this is crap," but I don't actually understand why he says that. So I go back to him and I'll say, "Can you explain this more?" And then he'll say, he'll explain it, and then half the time I'm like, "Okay, I understand where you're coming from. That actually makes sense. However, I still want to do this way. So how would I do this
Right.
better to make this decision work out better?" So sometimes it's just having that conversation with your editor to make sure you're both on the same page. And once he knows what you're trying to do, he can help you make that decision you just made better.
Yeah, the editing at whatever level is a conversation, right? It's a way of communicating between what you're trying to do and somebody giving you the best help to do the thing you want to do. And at the end of the day, you can disagree with me. I, in fact, love being disagreed with because I want you to be able to say, I'm not doing the edit you recommend. I don't want to change this thing or that thing. I like it the way that it is because I'm trying to do this thing. I want you to be able, now, maybe that makes me a rare and special thing. I don't know. But I want you to be able to defend your idea. I want you to be able to stand there because you're going to have to do that once the book goes out into the real world. You're going to have to be able to respond to feedback. So if you're able to sit there with me and go, I'm not changing chapter 6. You told me to cut it. I hear you. I don't want to cut it though. Well, then don't cut it. That's fine. I'm not the boss of your story. I'm here to help you do the thing you want to do. If I worked in traditional publishing still, then yeah, I'd be the boss of the story. But we'll talk about that in a second. Because step 3 is choosing how you want to publish this thing. So it's done, it's polished, it's ready to go out into the world in some way, shape, or form. There are other steps, but now we got to figure out how we're going to get it out there. So traditional, one way, self, another way. Both of those avenues of publishing are going to include the same steps. Really, the big fundamental difference here is who's paying for it. Like there's going to be a cost, somebody's paying. There's also a timeline consideration. Self-publishing has the ability to move much faster than traditional publishing for lots of different reasons. And there's an end result difference. Self-publishing has access to things that traditional publishing doesn't in terms of where the book can end up and where the book can be sold versus traditional having different experiences than self-publishing. But at the end of the day, the book is out. The book can be found somewhere and sold to another human. But it's up to you to choose which avenue you want. So let's talk about each of these avenues. We're going to start with traditional publishing because the majority of people I talk to who have dreams of being published, they're thinking about going traditional, using a trad pub, as it's called. So there are 3 things to consider: large presses, medium presses, and small presses. Your large presses are your big 5, your big companies. And I've put them here on the slide, sort of in terms of their size of control in publishing. The majority of them are Penguin. Penguin's the big player in the field, followed by Hachette, HarperCollins, Macmillan, and piddly down over there, Simon and Schuster. And those are the big movers and shakers in print everything at this point. And there are subdivisions and imprints, which are just small versions of them, that are medium presses. And medium and small presses do the same thing the large press does, just on a smaller scale with a smaller budget. And a lot of those medium and small presses are owned by large presses because it's a tax thing, because this is late stage capitalism. And if you thought you were going to go to a John workshop and capitalism wasn't going to come up, you'd be mistaken. So we have these large presses who, sort of think about big puppeteery hands controlling and steering the story in terms of what they can do and what they want and where they go. For large presses, you're going to need an agent. There's no way around that. Medium presses, probably also going to need an agent. Small presses, not always, though it is usually a good idea, depending on what genre you're writing in, to get one. That's traditional publishing. Big companies want your book. On we go. Now, to get in the door with whatever size press you want, particularly the bigger you go, you're going to need an agent. You're going to need representation. To get an agent, you need to write a query letter. Now, querying should be its own panel, because querying is there's a lot of like bells and whistles. But you need to write a query letter to get an agent. That's who you send this thing to. A query letter, just the rough math of it, 200 to 260 words. It should be double spaced. Somewhere in this thing, this query letter, it should include the book title in all caps. It should include the exact word count, and it should mention the themes of the book. There are other bells and whistles that people swear a query letter should have, and that's not necessarily true. But those are the basics. Double space, all caps, title, word count exactly. Themes ideally. And querying is a conversation, just like editing is, where you're not begging for attention. Please, oh, please, oh, please, oh, please, agent, I need you to rep my book. You're trying to start a business relationship, because what that agent is going to do, allegedly, is sort of help you open the doors to go forward and get your book to a traditional publisher who will publish it. So let's talk for a second about what an agent does. So you write a query letter, and the agent says, I would love to represent you. I like this book. I like this idea. Here's what they're going to do once you sign with an agent and get representation. They're going to do some amount of editing. It's not a lot. Why? Because they're an agent. They're not an editor. Some agents will hire editors out to do it, but an agent will take a stab at your book. Now, their job is to not produce the best narrative. They're not interested in narratives. They're interested in sellable product. So they're going to edit to make it marketable. They're going to tweak and tailor and suggest and cut and trim and sort of steer the book in a certain way. You can agree with it. You can not agree with it. That's on them. But they're going to do a little bit of that to try and make a marketable product. That's the big term they're going to use. And then, in addition to that, they're making phone calls and emails to publishers. Phone calls and emails. Things that you and I do all the time, every day. Anyway, and for this service, I'm making air quotes, for this service, you've done all this work. They've done considerably less work than you. They're going to take 10 to 20% of the money you make, flat out. They made some phone calls and emails, and they're taking 10 to 20%. We have a word in English for people who take 10 to 20% of your money and, based on very little labor they've done when you've done all the work. And that's a pimp. An agent is your pimp. They're going to pimp your work, not in a fun exhibit, let's add a juicer to your car kind of way, more like they're just going to exploit you. We're putting that out there because, hey, you want to go traditional? You need one of these people. So get your head around the idea that you're going to lose 10 to 20% of the money you are owed for your work. On we go. So we get an agent. I do want to point out now that I am not a lawyer. I know lawyers. I have sat next to lawyers. I've had lunch with lawyers, but I am not a lawyer. I am someone who is just familiar with publishing contracts. I have typed them up. I have read them. I am familiar with them. I've seen them a lot, but I am not a lawyer. And there is a difference, because what I am giving you now is not technically legal advice. It is person with experience in publishing advice. I'm not a lawyer, just a guy who knows some things. So your agent is going to find a traditional publisher to, say, hey, let's sell this book. And this publisher is going to provide you a book contract. It's a file, it's a document, it's a PDF. It's going to be anywhere between Two, and I think the biggest I've ever seen is 45 pages long. I'm going to tell you this right now. This didn't make it to the slide. If it is less than 3 pages, I need you to run away. I need you to scurry away and avoid them and not say yes, because 3 pages is real short and there's probably a catch. You want to get a sweet spot. Try 4 to 6, 4 to 10, where it lays out a lot of stuff. If it doesn't, there's a problem. And you either need to bring it up and say, hey, what about this and what about that? We'll talk about it in a second. But by and large, if they just say, we're going to give you this much money, here's a deal, and it's an email, you need it written down. You want a paper trail. You definitely absolutely want a paper trail. You get a book contract, read it over carefully. Now, what is a book contract? It's going to lay out some really critical information. It's going to basically tell you when the book is due at what stage, how it gets sent and goes forward, and then how and when you get paid. There's a couple points I want you to pay attention to. One, the payment schedule. So let's talk about advances, because that's what I mean when we talk about payment. People talk about a book advance. They mention it on social media a lot. They're going to give you a number. Usually it's a big number. I want you to take that number and divide it into pieces, because they're telling you the total advance. So let's say I saw on Twitter the other morning, somebody was really happy that they're getting, like, I think it was $12,000. They're not getting $12,000 all at once. They're getting a sum total of $12,000. They're getting $4,000 three times. 4,000 times three is $12,000. Your advance is divided into pieces. You're going to get a little bit of your advance, and it's usually thirds. Sometimes it's quarters, but usually it's thirds. You're going to get a third when you sign your book contract. So that's $4,000. Then some amount of time is going to pass, and you will get another $4,000 when your book is finalized. That means it's all set to go get a cover and be printed and sent out the door. And then you will get your last $4,000 the day your book releases to the public for sale. Now, the amount of time between those $4,000 payments can be anywhere from 8 months to 3 to 5 years on average. So plan accordingly. Don't expect to just get a fat ass check of $12,000 up front once. Be aware of your payment schedule. Plan financially accordingly. The next thing you want to care about is something called a kill clause. A kill clause is the idea of what happens when everything's a problem, when this relationship between author and publisher, or author and agent, it should also be in the agent contract, author and somebody else isn't working out. What do we do if they're really difficult? What do we do if you're just a jerk to me or whatever? A kill clause says, here's how much money you get, and here's how we end this relationship. We're going to tie off the loose ends. We're going to pay you this much, and then we're done. Along with that, you want to care about your rights. Now, again, not a lawyer, and there's loads of different kinds of rights to pay attention to. But we're going to care for our purposes. I want to focus you on two different things. One are the rights of reversion. See, because what's going to happen in traditional publishing is that you are basically letting this publisher rent or buy your idea from you. They're going to buy the book from you. That's the advance. And the reversion says after so many days, weeks, months, years, and after so many sales or not sales, eventually the book, the IP, the property, the material, the literal files, they go back to you. They become yours again. But in that interim period, it's the publisher who owns it. You've sold them your idea. The reversion is when it comes back to you, and it is critical, because let's say you don't sell enough books. The publisher will drop you, because the publisher's job is to make money. If you don't sell enough books for whatever reason, they have no reason to keep you around, but they can drop you, and the book you wrote, the idea, the property, the material, all that stuff, they can hold on to it for a period of anywhere between 90 days to multiple years, depending on the contract construction. And then eventually all the stuff will revert back to you, and then you can do something else with it. Now, here's a question. Can the publisher stall reversion rights if it keeps selling? Yes, absolutely. The publisher can always find reasons to stall. It can be bullshit reasons. It can be legit reasons. It can be simple reasons. It can be big reasons. It can just be reasons. Absolutely. The publisher will find a way to delay or avoid letting your stuff come back to you, because the longer they let it go, the more chance they have to make money from it. Totally a thing. It happens in comics a lot, especially lately. It's definitely important, and your contract should spell out the method by which the rights revert to you. Now, other side of the coin are the rights for distribution. How are you allowed to get your stuff out? Or how is the publisher going to tell you they're going to get your stuff out? Will there be an audio book? Will it be in other languages? Will it be sold this way versus that way? It's how are we going to get these books out to customers? Rights for distribution sound very complicated because there's lots of bells and whistles to consider. They're not actually complicated. It's just a lot of little moving parts. And if you're organized about it, okay, I know there has to be print rights and there have to be digital rights because there's going to be physical books made. Maybe not all publishers do physical books, but there's going to be physical books. There's going to be digital ebooks. Maybe there's an audio book. And then maybe like in some pipe dream down the road, if we sell enough, we want to do something else with it. We want to make it a podcast. We want to make it a this, make it a that. There are going to be rights for all those flavors and possibilities. But all that stuff should be spelled out in the book contract. And ultimately, you don't want to sign anything or agree to anything without reading it first. Not a yes in an email, not a, oh, sure, I'll sign it the minute I get it. No confirmation like that whatsoever. Get the thing, read the thing, have other people read the thing, and sign it if it's right. One of the things I do as a writing coach is read over people's shoulders to go, okay, let me explain this to you. This is what they're saying. This has been happening more and more lately. You can just ask. It don't sign anything without reading it. I can't make that any clearer. What about royalties? Shouldn't you pay attention to that in the contract? Yes, you should absolutely know how your royalty schedule comes out. Royalties happen like this, just so we're clear on how royalties work. Royalties say you start getting, so how do I, let's wind back for a minute. Let's say your advance, we'll make round numbers just for the sake of the argument. Let's say your advance is $12,000 like we talked about, okay? You won't see royalties, period, at all until the book sells $12,001. If you don't sell $12,001, you won't see royalties. You have to do what's called earning out. You have to earn more than your advance before they can give you royalties. It should be part of the contract. It's usually a whole page in the contract that lays that out. But you need to know where your royalties come from. You need to know when you can expect your royalties, because royalties aren't automatic. They're usually given 90 days after you hit a certain sales threshold. And then they're given usually 180 days after that first time. But that's all spelled out in the contract. Now, next question. If you get an unfavorable contract and refuse to sign it, should you try and renegotiate? Yes. Now, the publisher may be unwilling to budge. Lots of publishers are very unwilling to budge, and that's your choice. You can not sign a thing. That's fine. Always try to, sign with your own best interest at heart. Sign what feels good. Sign what works for you. Don't just sign it because you think, well, no one's going to give me another contract. I'll never get another deal. I better say yes. Don't do that. Don't do that. There's always another option. There's always another chance. It might not be the same. It might not be as exciting. It might take a while, but you don't have to sign a bad deal just because you're afraid there won't be another deal in the future. But to answer your unspoken question, yes, the publisher can be totally, absolutely unwilling to budge, because to a publisher, you are an ingredient in a recipe. They're not your friend. They're not your person. They're not your buddy. They're not anything. You are the flour in the chocolate chip cookies that they are going to be baking. Nothing is more frustrating to me than watching writers talk about how much of a good friend their publisher is to them. That's a gross misunderstanding of this process. Publishers don't like spending money. Publishers want things done quickly and want to spend as little money as possible so they can make more money possible. They're not usually in the business of wiggling on contracts or cutting you a special friend deal. They're not your friend. It's a job. So be aware that your publisher can always say no to your demands, and don't sign a thing just because you're afraid there won't be another person or opportunity down the road. Don't do it. You deserve better. Your work deserves better. On we go. Now, let's say you sign your deal. From this point forward, we're assuming you've got a deal that makes you happy and them happy. Once I see the question, hang on. Once you sign your deal, you are no longer on your clock. You are on the publisher's clock, their timetable. They dictate it. You will jump when they say go. Now, you want to, now here's the question in chat. Checking the contract is also asking you for money. Yes. You as an author should not pay your publisher to publish your book. You should not be paying your agent to do their job. You're going to pay your editor to edit the book way back in like step 2 of this process. But money flows to the author. You should not be paying to do the publishing process if you are going traditional. When we talk about self-publishing in a minute, we'll cover a whole different animal. But in traditional publishing, you're not paying the publisher, at least not as a separate other human. So the publisher puts you on a clock once you sign. They're going to tell you to edit the book. They will have an editor or several editors, and their job is to shape and frame that story to make it sellable, to make it marketable. They don't really care about the narrative. They don't really care about how do we make, whatever your name is. We don't want to make Porter a better author. We don't want to make Ross a better writer in the long term. We just want to make a book we can sell. And I need you to understand that you can expect a very, very short, like weeks timeline for getting stuff done. Traditional publishing is a big game of hurry up and wait. Their goal is to make a book they can sell. That's what they want. That's their job. That's their thing. On we go. At this point, you're pretty much, as the author, out of the deal. You're just going to hang out over there. And this is the stuff that happens totally unknown to you. The publisher is going to get a cover. Can you say no to the edits, or do they control the book? You can say no to the edits. You can absolutely say no to the edits, but understand that saying no to the edits does not help you in this relationship. It might preserve the book. It might be the way you want, but if you get labeled as somebody who's difficult in traditional publishing, it's a really hard label to shake off. And if you just keep saying no, especially if you say no to the majority of things, they have no reason to continue your contract. They will drop you. Be very prudent with your no's. It's one thing to say, no, I don't want to change this sentence on page 80. It's another thing entirely to say, no, I don't want that whole chapter cut. Be careful. Back over here. So the publisher is going to get a cover. They're going to reach out to a cover designer they know. They will negotiate that contract. They will figure out the design. You can have input. They might bring you into this meeting. They don't always. They don't have to. But they might bring you in and go, okay, we got a cover for you. Here you go. Or they might say, we have 2 or 3 covers. Which one do you want? And you can have a little bit of input depending on your publisher. Not always. Don't expect it. If, by the way, you have your own cover pre-designed, like you had that done yourself, you can bring it into this process at this point, but then the roles sort of reverse, and the publisher is the one who can say, no, that's not a cover we want to go for. But it is possible to bring your own work to the table. However, once this ball is rolling, You should not drag your feet. If you are somebody who loves to procrastinate or wait until the mood strikes you, you will be disappointed in traditional publishing because they need to hurry up and wait. They need you to go faster. They need you to do more. So don't drag your feet. Again, the goal here is to make a book they can sell. Covers. Same is true with titles. If you have a title and the title sucks, your title will be changed. It's just a thing. It's just a title. Don't get married to it. It's just a label. But remember, the publisher wants to create a thing they can sell, period. On we go. At some point in this process, you will be asked to write what's called a blurb. A blurb is the text you see on the back of a book. It's also called back cover sales copy or back copy. It's all the same thing. And this is going to be 100 to 200 words to advertise the book and appeal to readers. Is there a chance their suggested edits could destroy the story itself? Okay. First of all, destroy the story is very melodramatic. And second of all, yes. It is possible that you will get an editor in traditional publishing who doesn't know their ass from a hole in the wall, and they'll suck at their job and do a poor job with your book, and their editing will shred it to ribbons. Fun fact, a lot of writers come to me after being absolutely torn apart and discouraged by traditional publishing, and they come to me to go do self-publishing. So yeah, it is possible that their edits wreck your shit. Totally a thing. Let's come over here to blurbs. 100 to 200 words to promote and advertise the book, to make it sound appealing. It's the stuff you read when you flip a book over and you read that text and the customer makes that decision. Do I want to buy this book? That's what this is. You want to avoid ellipses, ... Avoid them. And avoid writing constant questions. Can Sandra uncover the secret of the haunted house? Don't do questions. They're overdone. It's a little lazy. Blurbs should be their own panel. The key thing you want to take away with blurbs or any sales copy, you want to balance information with appeal, emotional appeal, creative appeal, some kind of appeal, knowing stuff and feeling stuff working together to make your story sound interesting. It's a lot like your pitch expanded outward, which should also be a panel, but that's a different animal for a different day. On we go. Now, we get to this step. Hang on. Derek has a question. Before one steps into the publishing process, is it logical to try and have as much of the process done, including titles, blurbs, and covers? Derek, that's an awesome question. Logical, yes. Necessary, not always. A good idea, sometimes. For some of the stuff, having multiple titles or possible titles is a great idea. Having multiple blurbs, fantastic idea. Multiple covers, I would say no, because covers are expensive. But I mean, if you can afford it and it's not an issue, or if you're doing your own cover, that's fine. But it can be useful, though not always necessary, to have a couple different options. Options are our friend, but they're not always necessary. Sometimes, having two or three, it could be this title, it could be that title is great, but you write one blurb and it's fine. But it can be useful sometimes in some way to have some backups, to have some alternative plans. Sure, good question. Now, marketing, the animal that nobody likes. And I'm going to tell you this plain and simple. You will have to do, even in traditional publishing, you will have to do 75 to 85% of the marketing of your book. 75 to 85%. The publisher will do a little because they have to, because again, they want to sell the book, but their job is to not spend money because they're already spending money on the manufacture of your book. So the majority of marketing is going to fall to you. It is really to your advantage, especially at this point, to have a plan as to how you're going to do this, and or a pre-existing audience, friends you've already gotten on the hook, a newsletter, something, some group of people who know that your book is available, and that number needs to be fairly significant, not like I have 5 people and that's about it. 5's a good start, but please don't just stop at 5. We want to grow. We want to have people in advance. So I'm going to encourage you to choose your platforms and choose your methods. And remember, marketing is a sport. You want to compete in the sense that you want to do your best job, but you want to do your best job relative to your own efforts, not what other people are doing. Marketing is hard. You will always have to market your work unless you pay someone out to go do all your marketing for you. That is a job. You can hire a book marketer, but you will have to do your marketing. Period. Just plan on it, count on it. No one's going to know you've done a thing unless you mention it. Do not rely on the publisher posting a few things on Facebook or one or two things on Twitter and making one mention in Publishers Weekly as being enough to generate you the sales you are expected to get. Because yes, traditional publishing has certain sales expectations for you. You need to sell X number of books. You won't know what that number is. It won't be in the contract. Or if it is, the number they actually want is going to be higher than the number you see. They might say, we would love for you to sell 1,000 copies. And really their number is probably closer to 2,000. That's their job. Their job is to sell books. Your ability to market your book, and that means doing more than just posting the same thing on Twitter every 2 days. Your ability to market your book matters. You will always have to market. Count on it. On we go. There's still more. In traditional publishing, that's the whole process for every book you're going to do, whether that's the terms of your contract or just a one-off or whatever. You're always going to do all those steps per book. So is this like social media, Kickstarters and websites? It's social media for sure. Kickstarters are funding elements to raise money for your book. That's more of a self-publishing thing. Websites are a thing you can do to market your book, but not necessarily. Depends on what the website is. But yes, you want to get the word out to your audience, whenever they might be or whoever they might be, to buy your book. But that is the traditional process in a nutshell. If you understand that, you also understand the self-publishing process, because the self-publishing process does all those same things, except you're the publisher. You're the one paying the bills. You skip the step about querying and getting an agent, but you're going to do all the same things. You're going to need an editor. You're going to need a cover. You're going to need back cover blurbs. You're going to need to pay for publishing if you want physical copies. Self-publishing is not easier. It is just different, but it is the same steps. Only now, instead of the publishing company paying the bills and, breaking out your payments in small pieces, now you are both paying your own bills, but also making your own profit. It's a different animal. On we go. You will need an editor. Ideally, your editor will help you make your work better than you can do by yourself. And do not farm this out to AI or software, because those are the coward's tools for art. And I want to point out that when you are looking for an editor, you're probably going to want to either pay per word, which is usually pennies per word. None of this, partial fractions of a single penny, because that's not how we afford food in the world. You're going to pay per word. Sometimes it's 2 cents. Sometimes it's 1 cent. Sometimes it's 3 cents. Sometimes it's 25 cents. It ranges depending on what you're hiring for, who you're hiring, whatever. Or per project, a flat blanket price, X number of dollars for this, X number of dollars for that. It depends on who you talk to, depends on what you need. Always, 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 always use a contract. And yes, you really absolutely positively always, always, always need an editor. You don't always need a writing coach, somebody who's going to help make you a better writer in the long haul, but your book always benefits from an editor, and you get what you pay for. It is always worth the expense, and it is always in your best interest to make the best book possible. Do editors have specializations like grammar, plot structure, etc.? Yes. And there are editors who do a little bit of everything. Some editors specialize in a certain kind of editing. Some just do proofreading. Some just do copy editing. Some do, developmental editing. Other editors specialize just in romance novels or just in character development. Every editor usually has some kind of specialization. When you find an editor who doesn't have a specialization, you kind of want to look a little askance, a little like, huh, I didn't know they made that. It's a little bit weird to be an editor but not have a specialization. I have a specialization. I'm a developmental editor who specializes in strong characters and better quality writing. I'm known to be intensive and fast. Those are my things. I'm very good at what I do. And as a result, it costs money because this is my job. We're welcome to get a payment plan. I have bajillions of them. I am hyper flexible with clients, but you're going to want to pay them fairly. And it's expensive. It is not uncommon to have a book that's going to cost you $1,000 or more easily, probably multiple thousands, if depending on the rush or the mess or the number of things you need done. And you can get a payment plan. You don't have to pay it all at once. Break it up over time. Work that out with your person. Hi, one of the best things you can do to me is go, hi, I have no money, but I need this book edited. What can we do? And we figure out the budget you have and we make it work. And it can come down to like a little bit of money every month for, X number of days, weeks, months, or years. That's fine. It's not great. I would prefer it to not be $5 a month until we're both 90. But if that's what it has to be, that's what it has to be. Most editors have payment plans. Most editors are budget flexible. The ones who aren't, again, probably aren't the ones you want to hang out with. But you need an editor. You really do, especially if you're going self-publishing. Yes, I'm also very good at sorting out currencies. That is a thing I have spent time learning how to do. You mentioned a penny a word. So for a hypothetical 100,000 word book, it's $10,000. Would you say that's too many words, too high a cost, or about right? That's not Porter. That is not a silly question. 100,000 words at a penny a word. Let me just double check. I'm going to double check your math, not because I disbelieve you. I just want to make sure I get it right. That's 1,000, 10,000, 100,000 at 0.01. No, 100,000 words at a penny a word is $1,000. It's okay that you forgot what a penny is worth. That's legit, man. No worries. I got you. A penny a word happens. It's not great. A penny a word is actually low. You're probably going to want to aim somewhere between 2 and 5 pennies a word. So you're looking at anywhere between $2,000 and $5,000 for editing. I'm not even American. I can't tell. I can't do pounds or euros off the top of my head, but the internet can. We can Google that. But yeah, it's going to be a couple $1,000s. And that, of course, will escalate if you want it in a hurry. Most editors, just so we're clear, most editors will take some number of like weeks or months to do a thing. I can do it in days, but that's what I do. It is less of a cost. It is, yes, obviously $1,000 is less than $100,000 or whatever. But yeah, it's a lot. I have no argument with Canadian economics. I don't believe money should exist, but that's a different argument for a different panel on a different day. On we go. Now, next, beta readers, and we're going to go over. Blue, I'm going over, just so you know. I'll skip the bonus stuff. I'll put those out as podcasts, but I'm going over because we're talking. Beta readers. Loads of people on the internet love beta readers. They go batshit crazy for beta readers. You're going to need some number of beta readers. Oh, the Chilean peso is still around. Cool. Beta readers. It's a thing. A beta reader is not an editor. A beta reader is not an editor. Beta reader is not a critique partner. A beta reader is not your co-author. A beta reader is somebody who reads the book before the regular consumer does. They're an early reader. You don't need that many of them. 1 to 3 is fine. And you can ask them specific targeted questions. What did you think about this? What did you think about that? What about this? What about that? And you can collect that data via Google form. It does not need to be this sort of like, what did you think of my book? Oh, I thought it was good. You can get actual useful data. However, not all data is useful. Sometimes somebody will give you some advice or an idea as to what to do, and it fucks up your shit. It's just nonsense. You don't need it. So, not all data is useful. Now, we're going to say one more controversial thing. I need you to pay your beta readers. I need you to pay people who do work for you. Pay them. I don't care what you pay them something. Give them an Amazon gift card, buy them lunch, get them a six pack, buy them something. Do more than just say thank you. It's a job. Pay them for their job. If you were doing a job, you'd want to get paid, right? Same is true for other humans. Pay them for their work. This apparently is a very controversial thing that gets me yelled at on the internet. Whatever. I think people should be paid for doing a job. Shocking. On we go. Now, book covers. You're going to need to hire a cover person. You can find them. They're on the internet. They're all over the place. If you have, let's say, a map or charts, or you're making a cookbook or something, you're also going to need a layout person. That's a whole separate other person. Sometimes cover people are also layout people, but not always. But your cover designer will need something called art notes from you. And that's basically an idea of what the hell it is you want them to draw. More notes are better. Detail is better. Well, yeah, the guy I beta read for said last Christmas he would give you 50. Now it's time to go ask for your 50. Your cover designer wants art notes. Now, you might also need to pay somebody to help make your book a whole book with like graphics and charts and pictures and shit. That's a layout person. You can find one, just Google book layout, and there will be people who services and stuff you can do. I'm going to caution you, just like I said way back at the beginning, do not farm this out to AI. Cover design via AI is theft because it draws from a source material it doesn't get credit or paid for. And layout design by AI is a nightmare because it doesn't know what to do with straight lines. Do not use AI. It only gives you a headache later. Deal with a human. It's just going to make a better product overall. On we go. You're going to have to write your own back cover blurb. Avoid tired cliches. Avoid making it sound like it's just a cookie cutter that you scrubbed a few words out of. And by the way, if you have that editor, you can have your editor go over your blurb. It's easy. Just ask them, hey, help me with this. Takes, I don't know, 20 minutes. But you're going to have to write your own cover blurb. And now, the self-publishing side of this, you will have to do 100% of the marketing because it's your book. It is to your advantage at this point, most definitely, to have a plan, some kind of plan, and some kind of audience. Somehow, some way, somewhere. It should be its own panel. It could be its own whole conference. It's a big deal. It's a lot of stuff. Now, I will tell you that there are other things I wanted to go to, but we've run over time. So instead, I'm jumping ahead and I will save some other stuff for podcasts and things. And instead, ask you if you have any questions about anything. This may be a broad question, but when it comes to the publishing process, where does art consideration end and the business towards perspective and action begin? Derek, when you say perspective and action, what do you mean? Like what goes on the cover? Like, do I draw a guy that's running and jumping and stuff? What do you mean when you say perspective and action? Like in what sense are we grappling with these terms?
Sorry, do you mind if I
It's a
come
good
off mute for a
question,
moment?
and I want no, by all means, ask your question, man.
Perfect, thank you. Yeah, I had a little bit of trouble phrasing that. So when, when thinking about producing a book,
Right?
obviously it's a piece of art, but it's also like, kind of like you said, it's something we want to create and sell and we want, to share with the world. I
Yeah.
guess, you know, in my mind, it seems like it would be very, very easy to kind of let the artist part of oneself get in the way of, that,
Mhm.
getting an editor and letting them make those edits, or maybe the cover doesn't come out exactly the way you want it. So what's like a good balance I don't want to say relinquishing control or any sort
Yeah,
of
it's
artistic
relinquishing.
liberties.
That's the right
Yeah.
word.
Okay.
Yeah, you're asking about ego. It's a great question. It can be very difficult for a lot of people to give up control of a thing they feel very intensely about. A lot of people are very like some of the language we use when we talk about books, we call them our babies. So we feel this great emotional connection to them. So, of course, it can be very difficult to give up some kind of control or let someone else come in to affect the process. Part of this has to happen, though, whether it's an editor whose goal should be to help you make the best book possible. If you don't get a sense from your editor that they're doing that, go find an editor who does. They exist, I promise. It's just you got to make sure you vibe with your editor. The same is true with your cover designer. It isn't just a matter of make me the most popular cover that's trendy right now. You want to create a piece of art that speaks to your book or connects with your book in the best way possible. And if that means you got to shop around and talk to a lot of artists, great, do that. Ceding that control, though, is critical for this business. Unless you are somehow able to design your own covers and write flawless sales copy easily, you're gonna run into you're gonna need more people. It takes a village, to use a cliche term. The ability to farm out what you don't know or farm out what you are uncomfortable with on the trust or faith that this other person knows what the fuck they're doing and they will help me is a risk. Absolutely, it's a risk. That's why you want to aim for the most experienced people you're comfortable with and aim for the people who, you have a decent experience with. Oh, this person's not going to fuck me over. This person's not going to screw me because you've talked to them. As to the percentage you give up that control, it's going to be so variable from person to person and project to project. Most of the time, you want to give up some kind of control in little ways. Like if you're not a great artist, there's no reason to get real fussy about what shade of green they make the grass on your book cover. Sometimes you have to be willing to let some of that stuff go. It's more a matter of I have a particular vision in the broad sense, in the long term sense, and that makes some of the smaller things like how many cars do I need on the cover of my book? How much, smoke or flowers should there be? You got to be willing to let the little stuff go to get the big stuff done. And that's going to come down to a gut decision at the time, which is why there's such an emotional response to this kind of business side to things, because it does come down to this is how it feels synthesized or butting right up against this is what it needs to be. It's a great question that I wish I had a more detailed and concrete answer for, but it's sort of nebulous, but it's a great question. Thank you for asking it. Now, for beta readers, what kind of data should we focus on? Derek, you're super welcome. What kind of data should we focus on getting from them? I've often seen them associated with copy editing or even validate that the story is fun, but I'm not sure that's the best way to get help from them. It is not the best way to get help from them. In fact, it is one of the most detrimental ways possible. Beta readers are not copy editors. I'm going to say where's is I didn't even look to see who's here, but I know there were some people eager to have me say controversial things. So let's do some controversial things. If you're a writer who's farming out your copy editing to your beta readers, you are a shitty writer and you should be embarrassed. You should. It's a shitty thing to do because you're asking, I don't know, 10, 15, 30, 60 other people to collectively disagree as to whether or not there should be a comma in a sentence. And it's intellectually lazy to let 60 other people quibble over your semicolon or run on sentence structure. It does not make you a better writer. It does not make you a better book. It makes you a lazy exploiter of other people who are trying to capitalize on your position. It's a shitty thing to do, and you're a bad person, and you should feel bad the fuck about it. Beta reader's job is to tell you what they liked about the thing or what their response to your material is. The questions you should ask, here are the questions I tell clients when it comes time to do beta reading. Ask them if they can identify the main character, if they liked the plot, if they can summarize the plot, if they can find the themes, what they thought their favorite action scene was, what was their favorite moment in the book. Get their opinion, get their feedback. Ask them if there was anything you wish to see more of that was barely mentioned. Ask them if, was there a part that they felt disconnected from? Was there anything that felt extra to you? You want to ask targeted questions so that you avoid those statements like, it was good, I liked it, or it was fine, whatever, because their goal should be to help you know what the customer down the road is going to say. So if you can tailor your questions, what do you think the theme of my book was? What book do you think this was similar to? Did you like the twist in chapter 10? Who was your favorite side character? Things like that. Those questions give you more specific answers that do not require you to farm out things to people, and they can just give their opinion, because beta reading is just soliciting opinions. They don't have to be experts. Nobody needs to be a fucking expert. This is not a thing with a quiz. You're just telling a made up story with made up people. Here's a question. Should we do ARCs, or how should we handle that? Well, ARCs are expensive if you're on a self-publishing budget. Printing a physical book is expensive. Shipping it to people is expensive. You can do a digital ARC. There's nothing wrong in having the file made into a PDF and then giving that to people. That's a really useful beta reading tool. But by and large, just producing an ARC to say you have an ARC is an unnecessary ego stroke. You don't need it. If you want to make a file so that you can have people be like, hi, I'll read your book, there you go. But it doesn't need to be anything more than a PDF. Like, you can make it very fancy. You can spend money and print on demand a copy of your book with a cover and everything. You don't need to. It's expensive. Save the money. What is an ARC? An ARC is an advanced reader copy, ARC, advanced reader copy. It's the book you would give to reviewers, sometimes beta readers, but reviewers, bloggers, influencers, press people, in order to get feedback for the book, in order for them to give you quotes or reviews or stuff like that in advance of the book being available for sale. So if you had a book, I didn't even talk about book releases. Shit. So if your book is coming out in February, let's just make up, whatever year, your ARC in traditional publishing will probably go out to people in June or July of the previous year, so that it can be read and reviews can be given and quotes, what are called pull quotes. It's where somebody says, this is a gripping, exciting thriller. Those things come from ARCs. They come from reader copies. They're books that go out not for sale so that the book can be promoted. That's what an ARC is. One note that didn't make it way back into the traditional stuff is your release schedule in traditional publishing. It is reasonable to expect 15 months from the day you sign that your book will be out. So if you sign today, 15 months from today will probably be when your book possibly could be released for sale traditionally, because 2025's traditional publishing schedule has already been decided. You're probably halfway into 2026 at this point, if not entirely into 2026. So it's not unreasonable to say you're 2+ years out. Whereas in self-publishing, you can roll that out far faster. It's, again, hurry up and wait in traditional publishing. I should have made that clearer. That should have been a slide. It's a big deal. It's also possible that in traditional publishing, if you don't reach those deadlines, or if your book fails to sell a certain number by a certain point, they will drop you. They will just let you go. And then you're sort of on your own. And until the rights for your book revert back to you, you don't even have your book you came in with. They just cut you, like getting laid off from a job. That happens a lot. Your agent can also do that too. If you've written a book that they can't sell, they'll let you go, because they can always find somebody else who they can exploit and take 10 to 20% of the money from. Just be advised that's still practice. Those are still things that happen in traditional publishing. If traditional publishing fails and you get the book back, can you self-publish after that? Okay. Would it cause problems with the company? First of all, fuck the company. They cut you. I don't know why you'd want to be nice to the company that fired you. There's no benefit to that. And fuck them. They're not a person. Second of all, no, would they sue? No, if you got cut and the rights are yours again, like it's all you, it's all back to you, and there's nothing hanging, they have no reason to sue you. They have no standing. The rights are yours. If you don't get the rights back and you try to publish it yourself, they will totally sue you. They will sue you and your mama and your best friend and your pets and anybody they can, because that's just how they do. You need those rights to come back to you. You need the rights to revert. And once they do, you are free to self-publish it however the fuck you want. Without the rights, you can't do it. Why do you need an agent in traditional publishing? Could you not just be your own agent? Why do you need an agent in traditional? Because in traditional publishing, there's an expectation that agents are magic. They're not, they're just middle people. They're connectors of dots. But there's an expectation that an agent is somehow trained to negotiate, even though they've not been to law school, even though they've not really done any fucking thing other than show up and just work for a literary agency. There's an expectation that they're special. And traditional publishing loves things that they love maintaining the status quo. And the status quo always was that agents are special geniuses who can spot a winner. And so we negotiate with them because the author the author is an idiot. That's the traditional publishing assumption. So the agent must know more. But you could totally be your own agent. If you look for publishers that do what are called self-solicitation or self-acceptance, you can go straight to a publisher. However, most of those publishers are really small and don't have a lot of budget to do things. They're kind of like QuickBooks to the IRS. Yes, that is a great way to put it. They are very much the QuickBooks to the IRS. They can do a thing, and they can be helpful, but they do a thing at a cost. That's I might steal that for later. That's a really good way of putting it. I will give you credit if I steal it. But that's a really good way to put it. Back in the day, now we are going back 50 plus years, agents were far more critical because writers were far more respected and they were isolated from the process. Back in the day, the writer would just write a book and then hand it to the agent, and then all the publishing would happen, and then the writer would just get the check. That's long since changed. For a number of reasons, mostly being that the publisher didn't want to spend that much money. Yeah, good stuff. Any other questions? Any other issues? Any other things? What I'm going to do, because this is recording, I'm going to stop the recording at this point. But if you have more questions, I'm happy to hang out here and answer them. That's totally fine. I just need to stop this to make a video. Otherwise, we'll be here all day. So I'm going to pause I'm going to stop the recording, and then I'm going to answer stuff. Hang on. I'm stopping the recording. So thank you so much for checking this out, and I will see you very